Hello my crochet friends, I am Sarah from Ned and Mimi, and in this video we are going to talk all about crochet cables. So I have created some lovely swatches here just to show you what is possible to create, and you might be familiar with knitted cables. So crochet cables are created in quite a different way. So let's just have a look at this larger sample here. So all of the swatches that I've created are based on half double crochet rows. So that's half double crochet in US terms. And each row is the same height as a half double crochet, but you'll notice that on some rows we have added in these post stitches, and the angle that we do those stitches at and the way that they are constructed is what actually makes the cable. So depending on the way that you work these front post stitches, you can have something that's quite involved like this cable here. You can have one that's a little bit more simple like this one, and then this one is kind of somewhere in between. Now sometimes you are going to see cables done with alternating rows of double crochet and single crochet rather than half double, but I'm actually quite happy with the way the half double crochet looks, so usually this is what I stick with. So on all of our swatches here, they all start off in the same way with 2 rows of just plain half double crochet, and then on row 3, this is where things get a little bit interesting, and this is where we add in those front post stitches. So front post just means that they are worked around the body of the stitch rather than into the top loops of a stitch like we can see here. So normally we work our stitches under one or both of these loops, but with post stitches we're actually going around the body of the stitch. So on row 3 we will start working some post stitches around the body of the stitches from row 1. So for my sample today, I'm actually going to make this one here because I think it is the most straightforward and the one that we have the most chance of getting through reasonably quickly. So I'm going to put away my samples and get started. So today I am going to use Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn from We Crochet, and this is a weight 4 yarn, and I am going to use a 5mm crochet hook. Now depending on the yarn that you use, you might be using a different crochet hook. If you crochet very tightly, you might decide to go up a hook size. Even with worsted weight yarn, if you crochet very loosely, you might go down a hook size. So all of that is going to depend on your own preferences. So let us get started. So what I'm going to do is put a pattern up on the screen here, and then I will work the rows one at a time, following along with the pattern, and I think that should hopefully give you a good idea of how our cables are constructed. And as we go, I will give you all my best tips and tricks as well to help you get success from your cables. So I'm just going to start with a slip knot, and for this little swatch I need to chain any multiple of 7 plus 3, so I'm going to chain 17 to start. Okay, so there is my starting chain. Now sometimes with half double crochet you will see the first 2 loops counting as a stitch, but I actually don't really like the way that that turns out. I feel like that stitch kind of just doesn't end up being quite as sturdy or quite the exact same height as the rest of the stitches. So with half double crochet rows I like to skip the first chain from the hook, and that does not count as a stitch, and then I'll half double crochet in each chain across. Okay, so I have worked 4 half double crochets there, and I'm actually just going to pause for a second and grab a stitch marker. So if we have a look at our pattern, we can see that on row 3, where the cables start, we need to work into the 3rd stitch from row 1. So straight away I'm actually going to mark out that 3rd stitch, because I know that once I've done a couple of rows of half double crochet, I'm going to be looking at that row and trying to figure out, is that the starting chain, is that the 2nd stitch, is that the 3rd stitch? So to avoid any confusion at all, I'm actually going to mark the stitch right now. So I know I've done 4, so there's 1, 2, 3, so there is my 3rd stitch. So I'm just going to pop my marker around the body of that stitch, and that is where we're going to be working our very first front post stitch. So now for the rest of the row, I can fly along and just complete my half double crochets. So often I find with cables, it's that very first front post stitch is the one that causes the most confusion. And if you get that one right, the rest of the cable pattern actually follows quite intuitively because you have the correct starting point. Okay, so there we are, we're at the end of row 1. So now row 2 is just going to be another row of half double crochets. So I'll just chain 1, turn my work, and that chain does not count as a stitch. And then I'll just half double crochet all the way along this row as well. And now at the end of this row, be sure not to miss that last stitch, as sometimes it is hiding a little bit. And if you want to do a quick count, that's a really good idea. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So that is perfect. That is the count I want for that row. So now let us get into the fun bit, the front post stitches. So we'll chain 1 and turn, and now if we have a look at the pattern, we can either look at the chart, which I love. Now I love crochet charts anyway, but especially for cables, I just find the charts really help me to visualize where those front post stitches are going to go. So you can either have a look at the chart and we can see that we have to work 2 half double crochets there, or you can look at the written instructions for row 3, and that's also telling us to work 2 half double crochets at the start of the row. So away we go. So we'll do our 2 half doubles, and now I need to work my first front post treble crochet around the body of that marked stitch. So we'll pop that one out, and now front post treble. So with a normal treble crochet, you're going to wrap the yarn around your hook twice. For the post part, we're going to insert from front to back to front around that half double crochet, yarn over and pull up a loop. I have 4 loops on my hook, and then I'll just work those off 2 at a time, and that's my first front post stitch done. Now the next step in the pattern is to work a second one of those around the body of the next stitch. So if you have a look at the written pattern, it's actually quite wordy, and this is another reason why I kind of like charts, because they cut through all of that fluff. But it's telling us to work a front post stitch around the body of the next stitch 2 rows down. So this is 1 row down, this is 2 rows down, so it's our first row. So all it's telling us is to work around that stitch. So we'll yarn over twice again, work around that stitch, and do our front post treble. Okay, so that's the starting point done. So now it's actually going to be much easier to follow on from here because we have put those stitches in the correct place. So the next stitch in the row is a half double crochet, and the pattern is telling us to skip the stitches behind the 2 front post stitches just made. So if we look back here, we can see there's 1, 2, so we're not going to work into those because the front post stitches are sitting in front of them, and then we'll just do a half double crochet in the next stitch. So now continuing on with the pattern, we're going to work 2 more front post treble crochets, and because we worked that half double crochet there, we're going to skip this stitch from the first row and then work the next 2. So a few little tips for working these tall stitches. So this is another thing that I think trips people up a little bit with cables, is that you have to work these quite tall stitches, and we're actually going to be working even taller ones in a couple of rows time, but for now I think the front post treble is a really good one to practice on. So with these taller stitches, tension really is the key to achieving a neat stitch, and it's probably going to take plenty of practice, so don't worry if you have to make these stitches and then rip them out and make them again. It all is going to come with practice. So we want our tension to be fairly even here. Actually, we don't want it to be too tight or too loose. So if it's too tight, it's going to be next to impossible to pull our hook through all of those loops, and if it's too loose, the end result is just going to be a little bit messy looking. So we'll just do our 2 yarn overs there. So I actually like these to be fairly snug on my hook, so not too loose here. And then once I work around that post and yarn over and pull up a loop. These next few steps are probably going to take the most practice. So what I actually like to do is get my thumb and just pinch that first loop on the hook there as I yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And that just stops it from going anywhere. And then I actually kind of move my thumb up and keep pinching as I go up to the top, because I find that that helps to keep the stitch in place. So let's go ahead and make another stitch now. So we yarn over twice around the post of that stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then as evenly as we can, just pulling through those loops 2 at a time. So common problems here include ending up with a very big loop here on top, or ending up with a teeny tiny loop on top that's actually quite hard to pull your hook through. So both things are probably going to happen as you practice and as you figure out your tension for these taller stitches, but don't worry, they're completely normal. And in this instance, practice really does make perfect. So back to our pattern, again, it's telling us to skip these 2 stitches back here. So we'll do that. And then we're going to do 2 more half double crochets. And now for the rest of the row, I just need to repeat these 5 stitches. So I'm going to repeat my 2 front post trebles, my half double, and then my 2 front posts here again. So let's just fly along now and do that. So again, remembering that because we did our 2 half double crochets here, we need to skip the 2 in the bottom row when we do our next front post treble. Okay, so we're almost at the end of the row, so we should have 4 stitches left back here, which we do. So we're going to skip these 2 behind the front posts, and then we're going to just do 2 half doubles to finish off. So that's just giving us a mirror image of the start of the row. Okay, so that is our first row of front post stitches done. So that brings me on to my next tip, and that is to count your stitches at the end of each row. So in this swatch, it's pretty easy to see that we haven't really missed any stitches. So we can just do a quick count, and we should have 16 there, which is correct. But for some larger cable patterns, it actually is quite easy to maybe miss one of the half double crochets in between the front post stitches, or to skip the incorrect number of stitches back here, so accidentally working into the side, and that's going to throw the cables off and cause them to lean in possibly the wrong direction. And then when you get to the end of the row, you'll probably notice that you have an unexpected number of stitches left to work into. So definitely for a while you're getting used to cables, it's a really good idea to count your stitches at the end of every row. So let's just go straight on to row 4 now. So this is just a round of half double crochet, so we'll chain 1 and turn, and then just work all the way along to the end of this row. So at the back of our work, we're always just working rows of even half double crochet. So the front post stitches are always worked at the front of our work, so always on the right side rows. So again, just not missing that last stitch. You know what you could actually do is mark that first stitch of each row so that you don't miss it when you're finishing off the end of the next row. All right, so let's go on to row 5. So we'll chain 1 and turn. Now looking at our pattern again, we need to do 2 half double crochets at the start, so just like row 3. And now we are going to work our next front post stitch, and this one is a lot of fun. So it's called a front post double treble crochet. So that's a mouthful, isn't it? But this is basically just one higher than our front post treble crochets here. So we're going to yarn over 3 times for this one. So 1, 2, 3. So if we look at our chart, we can see that we're not actually going into the stitches directly below us. We're going to cross over and go into this second pair here. And the reason that these stitches need to be a little bit longer is they have that extra distance to cross over there. So let's go ahead now and work our next front post double treble crochet. So we're going to go right around the post of that third front post treble crochet from row 3. So we'll just yarn over and pull up a loop. So now I've 5 loops on my hook, and again we just work those off 2 at a time and trying to keep that tension nice and even. So you can see this one has gotten a little bit away from me. That loop is a bit big and there's a little bit of a gap there, but I think I can live with it. It's not too bad. And these stitches are harder. The taller the stitches get, the more tricky it is to actually keep your tension even. So let's do another one of those. So 1, 2, 3 around the post of the next stitch, and then just working those off 2 at a time. All right, there we go. So yes, definitely not quite as even as my first. So now I think you can probably see why it's so important to get the position of those first front post stitches correct. Once you get those, everything else is going to follow suit, because what you're actually doing is linking up all of these front post stitches every time you work them. So that's actually what's creating that cable effect. So back to our pattern, we'll just work this row, and then I think you should have plenty to keep you going to get practicing on your cables. So again, skipping the 2 stitches behind the ones we just made, and do a half double crochet in there, and that corresponds with the half double crochet from row 3 that was in between those pairs, but you can't actually see it now because it's hidden behind those front post double trebles. So now onto another one of those extra tall stitches. So we'll yarn over 3 times, and now if we have a look at our pattern, we're going back over these ones here and into the very first front post stitch from row 3. So again, I find that looking at the stitch chart for this just makes things so much clearer. If you look at the written pattern, it's so wordy, and you actually really do have to stop and think about what stitch it's telling you to work into. Whereas when you look at the stitch chart, it's just so much clearer, in my opinion anyway. So away we go. So we have to twist a little bit to angle our hook down, yarn over and pull up a loop. And now let's work all those off as neatly as we can. So that's not too bad, not too amazing either. So you can see that I've obviously done plenty of cables, and I still find these tall stitches very, very tricky. So there we go again, in here. And now this one was much better. All right, so practice really does make perfect. Okay, so that's our first set of front post stitches done for this row. So now just continuing on exactly as we did on row 3, we're going to skip 2 stitches here, then do 2 half double crochets, and now we just repeat this pair again. And then again at the end of the row, we just finish off with our 2 half doubles. Okay, so that's looking quite nice, isn't it? So I won't keep going, because actually for this pattern, we're going to just repeat our half double crochets for the next row, and then we'll repeat row 3, and then so on all the way along. So I can actually just put that away. So let's just have a look at our finished swatch here, so we can see that we have our pairs of front post trebles, then we have our crossed front post double trebles, pairs of trebles, and so on for as long as we want to go. So before I finish up, I just want to show you one more thing. Now, you might have found that you have these little gaps here where those front post stitches were, and especially when you're crossing stitches and you're skipping those half double crochets behind, it is really easy to create these gaps. Now definitely with practice and keeping your tension even, it can reduce those little gaps, but I still find that I get them from time to time, and I definitely can see some of them here. And the other thing is, if we flip around to the back, you'll see that we have all these little skip stitches here. Now it's actually quite smooth and I don't really have a problem with it, but sometimes I would like the back of my work to be completely smooth and I would like to get rid of those gaps completely. So I just want to show you another way of finishing off your front post stitches that's going to completely get rid of those gaps. So let me just put that away, and I'm going to grab a little sample that I started here earlier. So this is working the exact same stitch pattern that I just showed you, but if we flip around to the back, you'll see that it is completely smooth. So there are no skip stitches, there are no gaps at all. It really does just look like a half double crochet at the back. So I'm going to show you a little trick for achieving that. So I have just finished off here with a row of half double crochet on the wrong side, and I'm ready to go on to my next row of front post stitches. So I'll chain one, and then as with the previous swatch, I'm going to do 2 half double crochets. So there's 1, 2, and now looking at my stitch pattern, I can see that my next stitch is going to be a front post treble, but worked around the body of this front post double treble from 2 rows previously. So I'll yarn over twice, insert my hook around the body of that stitch, pull through, pull through. Now I'm going to stop here before I finish off the stitch. So what I'm going to do, instead of skipping that stitch behind, I'm actually going to work into it. And because all of these stitches have the height of a half double crochet, I'm actually going to finish off with a half double crochet into that stitch. So bear with me. So we're going to leave 2 loops in the hook. We'll yarn over, insert our hook into that stitch directly behind, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now I have 4 loops in my hook, and then I'll just yarn over and pull through all 4 at the same time. So this is giving us our front post stitch in the exact same position as all of the previous ones, but it's just meaning that there's no gap back here. So let's do that once more. So we'll yarn over twice. Now we're going to go around the body of the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then we'll start working off those loops 2 at a time, stopping before the very last step. Then again, yarn over, insert our hook into the stitch behind, and pull through all 4 loops. So this might just require a little bit of straightening out, but what it's going to end up with is a completely flat panel on the back. So now, because we've worked into those 2 stitches, we don't need to skip anything, we just half double crochet in the next stitch. Okay, and I can just continue on with that. So this is obviously completely optional, and if you're new to cables, I'd probably almost learn the other way first, just so you get lots of practice with your tension and just lots of practice with those taller stitches. But then if you are ready to move on to something a little bit more advanced or a little bit more complicated, I think you could add in that half double crochet stitch behind the front post stitches. So I'm just going to continue on and work the rest of this row, all the time just anchoring those post stitches in place with that extra little step at the end. Okay, so there we have our lovely little cable swatch with the completely flat panel on the back. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you have enjoyed working these crochet cables with me. And if you would like to try it out, I do have a beautiful poncho pattern that uses very easy crochet cables along the bottom, and this poncho is created just from a rectangle, so I think it's a really nice project actually to practice your cables, because there's no shaping or any other things to worry about. You just are basically crocheting a very long strip of cables, so that is definitely the best way to get started. So thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact me. Happy crocheting and take care.